He gave her our rent money? I whispered, rereading the text. You'll figure something out, right? The sandwich I'd packed him fell out of my hand and hit the floor. Then came the photo. Dean, my fiancé, wrapped around his ex at a wine festival, the same week I was calculating how to keep us housed. But that wasn't even the worst part. 2 days later, I found out he'd opened a fake business under my name, forged my signature, and left me, holding the bag with the IRS. He thought I'd roll over. What he forgot? I keep every receipt, and I've got 7 days to make him wish he never met a bookkeeper. I never thought I'd become the kind of person who finds peace in paperwork, but life has its own sense of humor that way. Every morning at 5:30, I'd settle into my little breakfast nook with that first cup of coffee, steam curling up like a question mark, while I sorted through the previous day's receipts. There's something soothing about putting everything in its place, a ritual that helped me rebuild after my divorce 8 years ago. You know that feeling when your workspace is completely organized? When every file is exactly where it should be, and you can close your eyes and still know precisely where to reach? That was my apartment. Small, but mine. Every surface gleamed. Every drawer had a purpose, and my careful. Budgeting meant I could even afford fresh flowers once a week. The calendar hanging in my kitchen showed our future in neat little boxes. Dean's open houses in blue, my bookkeeping clients in green, our shared dreams penciled in with stars. Dean used to tease me about my accountant soul when we first started dating. Megan, he'd say, flashing that real estate agent smile, you're the only person I know who gets excited about spreadsheets. Back then, his teasing felt affectionate. These days, though, there was an edge to it, sharp enough to notice but subtle enough to make me wonder if I was being too sensitive. Babe, you're overthinking again, he said last night when I mentioned the electric bill was higher than usual. Our money's fine. Our money. Funny how he always said that when he meant my careful planning, my emergency fund, my dedication to keeping us secure. I'd learned to keep quiet about the way he'd started treating our joint account like his personal ATM. The fancy lunches with clients that somehow never seemed to bring in commissions. The networking golf games that ate through what I'd set aside for our wedding fund. Each time, he'd brush off my concerns with a quick kiss and a, "You'll figure it out, right? You always do." Carmen, my best friend and retired paralegal extraordinaire, saw right through him from day one. "Girl," she told me over margaritas last week, "you're not his partner, you're his safety net." I remember stirring my drink, watching the salt crystals dissolve while pretending not to hear the truth in her words. The thing is, I understand paper trails the way some people understand body language. Every transaction tells a story, who we are, what we value, where we're really going. I keep copies of everything, not because I don't trust Dean, but because order is my version of a security blanket. Each neatly filed receipt is a small promise to myself. Never again will I be blindsided like I was in my divorce. This morning, as I reconciled our monthly statements, I noticed something new. Small withdrawals, always under $100, happening 3 or 4 times a week at a wine bar across town. Not our usual neighborhood spot. Not anywhere near Dean's listings. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to breathe. There could be a perfectly reasonable explanation. I reached for my phone, my finger hovering over Carmen's number on speed dial. She's been my just-in-case contact since before Dean. My lighthouse in storms I pray never come. But I hesitated. Love's supposed to be about trust, isn't it? About believing in someone even when the numbers don't quite add up? The coffee had gone cold in my mug. The steam long since disappeared. Outside, the city was waking up, street noise filtering through my window along with early morning light. Everything looked normal. My neat stacks of papers, the fresh orchid Dean brought home last week, his coffee mug waiting by the sink for when he got back from his morning showing. I slipped the statement into my review folder, right behind the others I'd been pretending not to worry about. Some people collect shells or stamps. I collect paper trails. Not because I'm expecting betrayal, but because I learned the hard way that hope isn't a strategy. Dean's right about one thing. I am good at figuring things out. I just hope I'm wrong about what these numbers are trying to tell me. I was packing Dean's lunch that Thursday morning. Same as always. Turkey on rye, no mayo, extra mustard. The way he liked it. The kitchen counter was scattered with receipts. I'd been sorting since dawn, trying to stretch our budget like a rubber band that was getting way too thin. You know that feeling when you're juggling numbers and hoping they'll somehow multiply if you stare at them long enough? The morning sun was streaming through our little apartment window, catching dust motes in its beam. The coffee maker gurgled its last drops into the pot, that familiar sound that usually meant comfort and routine. I'd already calculated everything down to the penny. Rent was due in a week, and we were cutting it close, but we'd make it. We always did, mainly because I tracked every dime like a bloodhound. My phone buzzed while I was wrapping Dean's sandwich in wax paper. Just a regular text notification, nothing special about it. Funny how the worst moments in life can start so quietly, isn't it? I wiped my hands on a dish towel and picked up my phone. The message was from Dean. Gave my ex the rent money. You'll figure something out, right? The sandwich slipped from my fingers and landed with a soft thud on the counter. I read the message again and again. 5 times total, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. Ever notice how your body knows something's wrong before your mind catches up? My fingers went ice cold around the phone, and that morning coffee turned to acid in my stomach. I opened our shared banking app, muscle memory taking over while my thoughts scattered like startled birds. There it was, the withdrawal. Our rent money, the carefully saved cushion that meant security, reduced to a balance that wouldn't cover half of what we owed. The numbers glared at me from the screen, harsh and unforgiving in their digital precision. Partnership. That's what Dean had called it when he moved in 2 years ago. I remembered his exact words over dinner. We're a team now, Megan. What's mine is yours. The memory tasted bitter as I stood there, watching that promise evaporate into pixels on my phone screen. My hands shook as I hit Dean's number on speed dial. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Then his voicemail kicked in, cheerful as a game show host. Hey, you've reached Dean. Leave a message and I'll get right back to you. I ended the call without leaving a message. What could I say? Hey, honey, did you really just gamble our housing on your ex? The kitchen felt suddenly too quiet, too still. The refrigerator hummed its steady drone, the same sound it made every morning, like nothing had changed. But everything had changed, hadn't it? The sun kept right on streaming through that window, lighting up the scatter of receipts I'd been organizing. Each one represented a promise kept, a bill paid on time, a foundation I thought we were building together. Now they just looked like paper confetti from a party that had ended badly. I picked up Dean's fallen sandwich and stared at it. All those mornings making his lunch, thinking I was showing love through little acts of care. Now I wondered if I'd just been showing him how reliably I'd clean up his messes. The clock on the microwave blinked 7:43. Hours to go, before Dean would come home, if he came home at all. Hours to sit with this knowledge that I'd been downgraded from partner to safety net. The coffee pot clicked off automatically, leaving only that refrigerator hum and the sound of my too shallow breathing. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down, my legs suddenly too weak to hold me. The morning sun kept warming the room, the coffee kept cooling in its pot, and somewhere in the building I could hear a neighbor's TV through the walls. Just another Thursday morning, except for the fact that my world had just tilted sideways. All I could do was wait. Wait for Dean to walk through that door. Wait for him to explain why he'd treated our future like pocket change. Wait to hear how he could text about our rent money, my carefully saved rent money, like he was asking to borrow a stick of gum. I was still standing in the kitchen when Dean breezed through the door around 6, wearing that $1,000,000 smile that used to make my heart skip. Now it just made my stomach clench. He tossed his keys in the bowl by the door, the one I'd bought to keep him from losing them, and strutted over like he was expecting a kiss. You would not believe the day I had, he announced, loosening his tie. 3 listings, 2 closings. He stopped when he saw my face. "What's wrong, babe?" Held up my phone, his text still burning on the screen. "Care to explain this?" He barely glanced at it. "Oh, that. Yeah, Mindy needed a quick business loan. She's got this amazing opportunity." "Our rent money isn't a business loan, Dean." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "The landlord expects that payment in 8 days. You know that moment when someone's looking right at you but seeing straight through you? That's how Dean looked then, like I was some minor inconvenience he had to manage. "Come on, Meg. You're acting like this is the end of the world. It's temporary." "When?" I asked, fighting to keep my tone even. "When exactly are you planning to replace it?" He wandered to the fridge, grabbed a beer. "Soon as Mindy's deal comes through. A couple weeks, tops." The cap pinged against the counter. "You've got that emergency fund, right? Just cover it from there. You're good at figuring these things out." I'd heard that phrase so many times. You're good at figuring these things out. Like my financial responsibility was some kind of superpower that existed just to bail him out. "The emergency fund isn't for covering your loans to your ex, Dean. What about late fees? What about—" "Jesus, Megan." He cut me off with an eye roll. "Where's your compassion? Mindy's trying to start something real here. You, of all people, should understand struggling to make it." That stung. I'd rebuilt my life after my divorce penny by penny, receipt by receipt. This isn't about compassion. It's about our home, our stability. The landlord doesn't take IOUs. "You're being dramatic." He took a long pull from his beer. "This is what couples do. They help each other out. Or don't you believe in that anymore?" The way he twisted it, you'd think I was the villain here. Every practical question I raised about due dates or late fees got batted away with another lecture about my rigid thinking or how I didn't understand business opportunities. I tried one last time. "Dean, I need to know exactly when—" "Stop." He held up his hand. "Just stop obsessing. Pull from savings if you're so worried. I've got to shower. Early showing tomorrow." He disappeared down the hall, leaving me with nothing but the echo of his dismissal and the faint hope that maybe the landlord would be understanding. That hope died the next morning when 3 sharp knocks hit our door. Mr. Peterson, our landlord, stood there with his clipboard and his permanently pursed lips. Even his bow tie looked disapproving. "Ms. Callahan." He adjusted his glasses. "There seems to be a problem with your account." My throat went dry. "Mr. Peterson, I can explain." 7 days, he cut in, tapping, his pen against the clipboard. Not 8, not 9, 7. I watched that pen hover over his ledger, ready to mark down our failure. "But the lease says what I say it says." His voice had all the warmth of January concrete. 7 days, Miss Callahan. Pay or pack." The door clicked shut with the finality of a judge's gavel. I pressed my forehead against the cool wood, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall, each one. Ticking away another second of the week, I had left to salvage everything. 7 days. 168 hours to somehow conjure up $2,000, or watch my carefully rebuilt life crumble all over again. I spent those 3 days in a fog of unanswered calls and desperate math. You know that feeling when your stomach drops every time your phone buzzes, hoping it's the one message that'll make everything okay? Yeah, multiply that by 72 hours. Each call went to voicemail, felt like a slap, and Dean's chipper greeting started to sound like mockery. During my lunch breaks, I'd hide in the office supply closet, punching numbers into my calculator until my fingers cramped. Savings account? Too thin. Credit cards? Maxed from our romantic weekend getaway last month. Dean's idea, of course. Personal loan? My credit score was still climbing back from my divorce days. Ever notice how money problems make time feel like it's running through your fingers like sand? The landlord's words, 7 days, had started living rent-free in my head. Ironic, right? Every time I checked the mail, my hands would shake a little. Bills and junk mail never looked so threatening before. Remember those old photos that would slowly develop in dark rooms? That's how the truth was coming into focus, one painful detail at a time. I kept thinking about how Dean had pushed for joint accounts 6 months ago, praising my financial wisdom. Now I wondered if he'd been studying my habits like a burglar casing a house. Then came that Thursday afternoon. I was eating lunch at my desk, a sad little yogurt cup that matched my mood, when my phone pinged with a social media notification. You ever have one of those moments where you know you shouldn't look, but your finger moves anyway? The yogurt turned to acid in my stomach. My cheeks burned so hot I had to press my cold water bottle against them. It wasn't just that he was with her, it was the performance of it all. The calculated casualness, the public display of, what? Victory? That's when I called Carmen. We'd met years ago when she helped with my divorce paperwork, and she'd become the voice of reason I turned to when things got messy. Carmen's the kind of friend who brings both tissues and brass knuckles to a crisis, figuratively speaking, of course. He's ghosting me, I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. Our rent's due in 4 days, and he's at a wine festival with his ex. Carmen went quiet for so long I thought we'd lost the connection. When she finally spoke, her voice had that tone, the one she used to get when she spotted something wrong in a legal document. "Honey," she said, slowly, "Dean's not dumb, and he's not careless. Men like him don't just take money and run. They build cover stories first." My fingers went numb around the phone. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to look closer. Can you check business filings tonight? Something's not adding up here, and it's not just your bank balance." Right then, my computer pinged with an email from the landlord. Another reminder. But for the first time in days, instead of panic, I felt something else stirring in my chest. Something that felt a lot like purpose. I glanced at the Excel spreadsheets on my second monitor, the ones I'd been using to track every penny Dean and I had spent together. Funny how the same skills that made me a good bookkeeper might just help me uncover what he was really up to. The sound of Carmen's laptop hitting my kitchen table that night felt like a gavel dropping. She'd insisted on coming over right after my call, armed with her paralegal expertise and a determination I hadn't felt in myself since seeing those wine festival photos. "I've seen this game before," Carmen said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Let's start with the Secretary of State's business registry." She spoke with the kind of certainty I used to have before Dean's text message blew up my world. You know that feeling when you're about to look at something you can't unsee? That's how my stomach felt as I pulled my chair closer. The blue light from Carmen's screen cast shadows across my receipts and budget sheets, the ones I'd kept so meticulously, thinking they meant something. "Type in your name," Carmen instructed, gesturing at the search field. "Let's see what pops up." My fingers trembled slightly as I typed. The search results loaded, and there it was. Elite Home Staging, Solutions LLC. My name was listed as the owner and registered agent. The address wasn't mine. Someplace over in Highland Park I'd never even visited. I didn't create this," I whispered, my throat tightening. "I've never even heard of this company." Carmen's eyes narrowed behind her reading glasses. "Click on the filing history." Each document we opened felt like another punch to the gut. Tax forms, bank account authorizations, vendor contracts, all with my signature, except they weren't my signatures at all. Someone had tried to copy my handwriting, but the loops were too wide, the slant all wrong. "Look at these dates," Carmen pointed out. "The company was registered 3 months ago, right when Dean started talking about Mindy's business troubles." She scrolled through more pages. "And here's your social security number on the tax documents." The nausea hit me like a wave. He used my identity for this? I could barely get the words out. But why would he? "Because you're the perfect fall guy," Carmen cut in, her voice gentle but firm. "Clean credit, stable job, no criminal record. If anything goes wrong with this company..." "It all leads back to me," I finished, finally understanding. The room felt too small suddenly, the walls too close. Remember how safe I'd felt just this morning, packing his lunch? Now, every memory of Dean's financial favors took on a darker shape. Carmen started taking screenshots, saving them methodically. "First rule of fraud investigation, Document everything before it disappears. She glanced at me. Your signature's forged, but proving that takes time. Time you might not have if they've already... The distinct sound of a key sliding into my front door lock cut her off mid-sentence. Dean's key, I'd recognize that. Specific scrape anywhere. 3 days of ignoring my calls, and now he shows up? Carmen's hand found mine under the table and squeezed. Don't let on what we know, she whispered urgently. Not yet. I nodded, my pulse hammering in my throat as the door began to open. The laptop screen still showed the damning evidence of Dean's betrayal. My name, my forged signature, my future being gambling away without my knowledge. And now, here he was, probably ready with another smooth explanation about why everything was my fault. The hinges creaked, that same sound I'd once found comforting back when it meant my partner was coming home. Now it felt like the opening notes of a horror movie, and I was the one who'd invited the monster in. Carmen showed up at 7 the next morning with 2 steaming travel mugs and a determined glint in her eye. Time for documentation 101, she announced, settling at my kitchen table. First rule of paper trails: never let them see you coming. You know that feeling when someone hands you a flashlight in the dark? That's what Carmen gave me that morning. Not just tools, but clarity. She pulled out her laptop, and I watched her fingers dance across the keys, showing me how to access archived statements and transaction histories. See this timestamp here? She pointed to a line showing Dean's transfer to Mindy. That's your ammunition. Every electronic move leaves footprints if you know where to look. I caught on quick. Maybe it was all those years of bookkeeping, but following money's path felt natural, like reading a story written in digits and dates. We created folders, organized by week, each one filled with PDF statements and screenshots that painted Dean's betrayal in black and white. Remember when we used to write everything in check registers? I asked Carmen, trying to smile. Now it's all digital breadcrumbs. Digital's better, she replied, showing me how to capture screen recordings. Paper can burn. The cloud remembers forever. Each night after work, I'd sit at my kitchen table under that harsh fluorescent light. You know, the kind that makes everything look stark and unforgiving. Perfect lighting for what I was doing. I traced connections between accounts, matched withdrawal times with deposits, built a timeline that even a child could follow. The wine festival photos hit differently now. Each one got downloaded, time-stamped, and matched against bank records. That smug smile of Dean's? It lined up perfectly with a $1,000 transfer to Mindy's account. Their matching wine glasses clinked together right around when my rent money vanished. Getting evidence is like knitting, Carmen said, while notarizing another statement. One stitch at a time until you've got something strong enough to wrap yourself in. The wet stamp came down on each paper with a satisfying thunk. Official, undeniable, real. I organized everything chronologically. The forged company documents, the bank statements, the social media posts. My fear was morphing into something else with each new piece of proof. You ever watch ice form on a pond? That's how it felt, my panic crystallizing into purpose, spreading clearer and harder by the hour. A week into our paper chase, I had a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Facts don't charm their way out of trouble like Dean always did. Numbers don't ghost you when things get tough. Documents don't gaslight you into doubting your own eyes. I was at my desk at work, running payroll numbers like any other Tuesday, when my phone lit up. My boss's name flashed on the screen, and my stomach dropped. He never called my direct line, always had his secretary schedule meetings instead. That's the thing about revenge folders, isn't it? They're like life rafts. You hope you never need them, but when the water starts rising, you're damn glad you built one that floats. My hand hovered over the phone as it rang again. Sometimes the scariest calls are from numbers you know by heart. I stared at my boss's name flashing. On my phone screen, each ring making my stomach sink a little deeper. I'd worked here 6 years without a single problem. Now, watching my colleagues through the glass walls of my cubicle, I wondered how many of them had already heard whatever story Dean had spun. "Come to my office, please," Mr. Patterson said when I answered. His voice had that careful flatness that meant trouble. You know that walk to the principal's office feeling? The one where your legs feel heavy and every step echoes. Yeah, that's how it felt, crossing our open plan office, past the water cooler where I usually chatted about weekend plans. Today, nobody looked up. Patterson sat behind his desk, hands folded over what I recognized as my own carefully organized documentation. My proof, my protection. Only now it looked like evidence of something else entirely. "Megan, we have a situation," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "The brokerage received some concerning information about you this morning." I settled into the chair, fighting to keep my face neutral. "What kind of information?" "Dean Roberts contacted us." Patterson's jaw tightened. "He says you're under IRS investigation for tax fraud. Something about a staging company?" My mouth went dry. I'd spent nights building my case, gathering every scrap of evidence to prove Dean's deception. Now he'd turned it all against me, using my own paper trail like a noose. "That's not," I started, but Patterson raised his hand. "Look at these." He spread printouts across his desk. My documentation, but shuffled and annotated to tell a different story. My signature, the forged one, highlighted in yellow. Bank transfers marked with red question marks. Dean provided quite a detailed account. "Those documents are forged," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I can explain. Megan." Patterson leaned forward, his expression shifting from suspicion to something worse. Pity mixed with disappointment. "We can't have our books handled by someone under federal investigation. The reputational damage alone." The air conditioning hummed overhead, and I remembered how proud I'd been when I first sat in this office, accepting the job that helped me rebuild after my divorce. "I'm not under investigation," I insisted. "Dean's lying. He took our rent money, and when I started gathering proof—" "You need to clear this up." Patterson's tone went flat, professional. "Today, if there's any chance these allegations are true—" He left the threat hanging. I gripped the armrests of my chair, knuckles white. How am I supposed to clear up allegations that don't exist? "That's not my problem." He straightened the papers, sliding them into a folder. "But until this is resolved, consider yourself on probation. One hint of federal involvement, and we'll have to terminate immediately." I walked out of his office feeling like I was moving through water, every step slow and heavy. My computer screen blurred as I sat down, but I refused to cry. Not here, not where Dean could somehow twist that too. The drive home was a blur of autumn trees and brake lights. All I could think about was how methodically Dean had played this, using my own careful nature against me. I documented everything because documentation meant safety. Now those same papers made me look guilty. The final punch landed when I reached my apartment building. There, stuck to my door with bright orange tape, was a new notice. 72 hours to vacate or face legal action. I stood there, keys dangling uselessly in my hand, reading those words over and over. 3 days. Dean had managed to threaten both my job and my home in the space of a morning. The hallway felt like it was spinning. My phone buzzed. A text from Carmen. Just 6 words, but they hit me like a shot of adrenaline. "Let's let him hang himself publicly." I peeled the notice off my door, hands shaking not with fear now, but with something else, something harder. When you've lost everything once before, you learn that rock bottom has one advantage. There's nowhere to go but up. I stared at the notice taped to my door, the red 72 hours stamped across the top like a countdown timer. You know that moment when bad news hits and your ears start ringing? That's where I was, standing there while the hallway seemed to tilt sideways. My keys clattered against the counter as I walked inside. The apartment I'd worked so hard to keep felt like it was shrinking with each breath. 3 days, 72 hours. The math kept spinning in my head while I sank into the couch cushions, still warm from the sunlight streaming through the windows Dean had once helped me dress with curtains. Remember how proud I was of this place? The way I'd arranged everything just so after the divorce, like each properly placed item was a tiny victory? Now all I could see were the boxes I'd need, the newspaper I'd have to collect for wrapping glasses. The local motels flashed through my mind. Which ones took weekly rates, which ones wouldn't make my skin crawl. The worst part wasn't even the eviction notice. It was knowing that tomorrow I'd walk into work and feel those stares. Janet from accounting, Tom from HR. They'd all heard about the IRS investigation by now. Office gossip moves faster than light, doesn't it? Every time someone would duck into a cubicle or lower their voice as I passed, I'd know exactly what they were whispering about. Fighting back seemed pointless. Dean had played this like a chess master, setting up his moves while I was still learning the rules. The evidence folder sat on my coffee table, fat with documents that now felt more like dead weight than ammunition. What good were paper trails when he'd already poisoned every well I could drink from? I picked up the notice again, reading it until the words blurred. The phrase "to vacate" kept jumping out at me, two simple words that carried the weight of everything I was about to lose. My fingers traced the official letterhead, and I caught myself wondering if maybe surrender wasn't the smarter play. Pride's expensive when you're facing homelessness, and I was running out of chips to bet with. The gentle knock at my door nearly made me jump out of my skin. It was Carmen, standing there with 2 bags of groceries and that look she gets when she's about to take charge of a situation. You know the one, part general, part guardian angel. "Honey, why aren't you answering your phone?" She bustled past me, setting down her bags. The familiar rustle of paper and plastic should have been comforting, but it just reminded me of all the packing I'd have to do. I watched her spot the notice on the coffee table. She picked it up, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, and I saw her jaw tighten. Then she looked at the evidence folder, back at the notice, and something sparked in her eyes. 72 hours? She snorted. "Please, that's not even legal without a court order." She set both items down and turned to face me. "Megan, stop looking like you're at your own funeral. We're not done yet." I must have looked as hollow as I felt because her voice softened. "Listen to me carefully. You don't have to prove your innocence first. Dean has to prove his innocence last." "What does that even mean?" My voice cracked on the question. Carmen's smile turned sharp. "It means we let him hang himself publicly." The way she said it made my stomach flip. Hang himself? Think about it. Dean's confident because he thinks he's got you cornered. But cornered animals are dangerous, and you've got something he doesn't expect. She tapped the evidence folder. Documentation, real documentation. I felt a flicker of something, not quite hope, but maybe its stubborn cousin. "But if he sees me coming..." "That's just it." Carmen leaned forward. "He won't see you at all, not if we play this right." My hands were shaking, but for the first time since the boss's office, my mind was clearing. "What exactly are you suggesting?" The next morning hit different. You know that clarity that comes after a night of planning? When your fear finally has a direction to point? Carmen showed up at 7 with her laptop and that determined gleam in her eye I'd seen back in her paralegal days. "First rule of invisibility," she said, setting up at my kitchen table. "We create someone Dean would never connect to you." Her fingers flew over the keyboard. Someone he'd desperately want to impress. I watched her work, cradling my coffee like it might steady my hands. What kind of someone? A venture capitalist looking to diversify into real estate staging. She glanced up. Rich enough to be interesting, new enough to seem gullible. We spent the next hour crafting Alexandra Bennett, a Silicon Valley transplant with more money than experience. The kind of mark Dean couldn't resist, wealthy, female, and seemingly naive about the local market. Carmen helped me write her bio with just enough LinkedIn presence to look legitimate without being too detailed. "Now for the bait," Carmen said, pushing her reading glasses up. "The invitation needs to sound like easy money wrapped in business jargon." I knew exactly how to hook him. I'd watched Dean chase flattery like a drug for 2 years, seen how his eyes lit up at any hint of recognition. The words flowed surprisingly easy. "Dear Mr. Harrison, your innovative approach to property staging has caught the attention of our investment group. We're particularly impressed by your market penetration strategy and are exploring partnership opportunities in the six-figure range. I'll be in town next week and would appreciate discussing potential synergy." "Perfect," Carmen nodded. "Now we leak it to his boss." "Marcus?" I felt my throat tighten. "The same Marcus who's ready to fire me over Dean's IRS lies?" "Exactly." Carmen's smile turned knowing. "Marcus Knox, the broker who spends more on his suits than his car payments. The man who'd rather die than miss a networking opportunity." She was right. Marcus's whole personality was built on being the most connected broker in 3 counties. The thought of one of his agents landing a major investor without his knowledge would drive him crazy. I drafted the forward to Marcus carefully. "Just FYI, saw this circulating. Might want to know what's happening under your letterhead?" "Anonymous email?" I asked. Carmen shook her head. "From a concerned competitor. Makes it look like someone's trying to poach Dean from under Marcus's nose." My hands were steady now as I typed. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was chess. Every move had to look natural, inevitable. The kind of trap that works because the target walks in believing it's their own brilliant idea. The response came faster than we expected. Dean's name popped up on my phone within hours. "Absolutely interested in meeting. Actually have been planning major expansion. Perfect timing." I showed Carmen the message. Despite everything, seeing his enthusiasm made my stomach clench. 2 years of memories tried to surface, morning coffees, weekend plans, shared dreams. I pushed them back down. "He's not even asking questions," I said softly. "Just jumping straight in. Because he thinks he's the smartest person in the room." Carmen squeezed my shoulder. "Let him keep thinking that." I set the phone down carefully, like it might bite. "Carmen," I whispered, "if this goes wrong, I lose everything. My job, my apartment, my reputation, all in one afternoon." "Hey." She turned my chair to face her. "Look at me. You've already lost those things. Dean took them the moment he set you up. The only difference is, now we're choosing when and where to fight back." I nodded, but my voice still shook. "One shot. One shot," she agreed. "But honey, we're not the ones who have to hit the target. Dean's going to do that all by himself." Looking at the phone, at Dean's eager response glowing on the screen, I realized she was right. He'd take every step toward his own undoing, confident he was walking toward success. That's the thing about traps. They work best when the prey thinks it's the hunter. I dressed in my plainest gray sweater and dark slacks that morning, the kind of outfit that makes people's eyes slide right past. You know the type, the clothes you wear when you want to disappear into the wallpaper. My hands were trembling as I pulled into the hotel parking lot 2 hours early. But by the time I reached the conference room door, they'd steadied. Funny how revenge can calm your nerves better than any deep breathing. "Remember," Carmen whispered, guiding me to a spot behind a tall potted plant near the coffee station. "You're just here to witness. No matter what he says, no matter how smug he gets, you're invisible today." I nodded, settling into my corner as Carmen worked the room, greeting each arrival with practiced ease. The investors started filtering in around 1:45 p.m. If you weren't paying attention, you might have missed the subtle tells. The way they positioned themselves strategically around the room, how their eyes swept every corner, their perfect posture that screamed authority. But I noticed. After 20 years of bookkeeping, you learn to read people's power dynamics like balance sheets. "State Licensing Board," Carmen confirmed under her breath as she passed by, pretending to adjust the coffee urns. "Every single one of them has the power to pull his license. One signature on those forged documents is all they need." My throat went dry. This wasn't just about getting even anymore. This was career execution. I felt a weird mix of electricity and dread shoot through my stomach. Dean had always counted on charm to get him out of trouble, but these weren't people who'd be swayed by his practiced smile and ready excuses. They dealt in hard facts and consequences. The door swung open again, and Marcus Wright, Dean's boss, strode in like he owned the place. You should have seen how quickly that swagger faltered when he scanned the room. His eyes narrowed at the serious faces, the neat stacks of papers, the complete lack of the usual glad-handing that happened at these investment meetings. His jaw clenched so tight I could practically hear his teeth grinding. Marcus was old-school real estate, all about maintaining the right image, and something about this crowd was setting off his alarms. Then Dean burst in, and oh Lord, it was like watching a lamb skip into a wolf den. He had on his $1,000 suit and that megawatt smile that used to make my heart flutter. Now it just made my stomach turn. "Ladies and gentlemen," he spread his arms wide, playing to what he thought was his audience. "I can't tell you how excited I am about this opportunity. Our staging company has been revolutionizing how we present properties in this market." He was using that smooth, practiced tone, the same one he'd used when he'd first told me we should move in together, that we'd be perfect partners. I watched him work the room, stopping to shake hands, dropping compliments like breadcrumbs. You know, when I first envisioned this business model, he was laying it on thick, just like he had with me about building a future together. The difference was, this time, his lies were about to hit a brick wall of consequences. He reached into his leather briefcase, the one I'd given him for Christmas, and pulled out a folder. My heart started pounding so hard I had to press a hand against the wall to steady myself. In that folder were documents with my forged signature, proof of every lie he'd told, every dollar he'd stolen. "I've brought our complete business portfolio," Dean announced proudly, holding up the papers like a trophy, including all the registration documents and tax filings. The licensing board members leaned forward slightly, their faces masks of professional interest. But I recognized the look in their eyes, the same look I got when I spotted an accounting irregularity that was about to blow someone's scheme wide open. As Dean started passing out copies, I pressed my fingernails into my palms. There was no stopping this now. No warning I could shout, no last-minute rescue. Not that I wanted to save him, but watching someone walk straight into their own destruction, even someone who deserved it, it does something to your insides that's hard to describe. I sat behind a decorative plant, my heart thundering as Dean strutted to the front of the conference room. You know that moment when you're watching someone walk straight into their own mess? That was it. Dean hadn't changed a bit. Same perfectly pressed suit, same practiced smile that used to make my knees weak. Funny how different that smile looked now that I knew what lurked behind it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dean announced, pulling documents from his leather briefcase with a flourish. "I'm excited to share how our staging company is revolutionizing property presentation." The words slithered out, smooth as honey, and I had to give him credit. He really believed his own pitch. I caught Carmen's eye across the room. She gave me the tiniest nod, and my fingers dug into the armrests. This was it. Dean handed the forged paperwork to the front row, beaming like he was handing out winning lottery tickets instead of evidence. The shift happened so fast it made my head spin. 1 second, Dean was in full charm mode. And the next, badges flashed, cameras clicked, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. You could actually see the moment Dean's confidence cracked. His smile stuttered, then froze completely as realization hit him like a slap. "Mr. Harrison," one of the board members stood, her voice sharp as a razor. "Would you care to explain why these documents bear a forged signature?" She held up a page I recognized, my supposed signature, the one Dean had butchered, trying to copy my handwriting. Dean's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. "There must be some mistake," he started, but his silver tongue had finally failed him. The board member just kept pulling out more documents, each one another nail in his coffin. Then his boss stepped forward, face flushed dark as a storm cloud. "What the hell is this, Harrison?" he demanded. Through the plants, I watched the vein in his temple pulse. Fake companies? Forged signatures? Identity theft? "I can explain," Dean tried, but his voice had lost that smooth edge. Now it just sounded thin and desperate. This is all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? His boss's laugh could have stripped paint. The only thing I understand is that you've made this brokerage look like a circus of criminals. He jabbed a finger at Dean's chest. You're done. Fired. Pack your desk and get out before I call the police myself. The board members were already gathering the evidence, treating each page with white-gloved care. My evidence? My proof? Remember how I said I understand paper trails? Well, they were speaking loud and clear now. I saw Dean's face change, really change. The charm drained away completely, leaving something hard and ugly behind. His eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal's, searching for someone to blame. My stomach clenched as his gaze swept toward my hiding spot. For one heart-stopping second, I thought he'd spot me. I could almost hear his accusations already. It's all Megan's fault. She set this up. She's the one you want. But he didn't see me. Instead, security appeared at his elbows, summoned by his boss's sharp gesture. Two burly men in dark suits who made Dean look small for the first time since I'd known him. This way, sir, one of them said, and it wasn't a request. I watched them lead him out, his perfect posture finally crumbling. The same man who'd texted about stealing our rent money like it was nothing, who'd smiled in photos with his ex while I faced eviction. He didn't look so confident anymore. Carmen appeared at my side, silent as a shadow. You okay? She whispered. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. Through the window, I could see them escorting Dean across the parking lot. His shoulders were slumped, his step unsteady. The sun caught his silver hair one last time before he disappeared into his car, the one he'd bragged about buying with our success. He's going to figure out it was you, Carmen murmured. I know, I answered, watching his car pull away. But he can't prove it any more than I could prove what he did to me. The irony almost made me smile. Almost. That evening, I sat with Carmen at a high coffee shop across from the office building, watching my hands finally stop their trembling. The adrenaline crash hit hard. You know how it goes when you've been running on pure nerve for hours and then suddenly, everything stops. You did good in there, Meg, Carmen said, sliding a chamomile tea my way. Real good, and now comes the avalanche. I wrapped my fingers around the warm cup. What kind of avalanche are we talking about? The kind that buries people like Dean. Carmen pulled out her tablet and started ticking off items. The licensing board's already moving to freeze every account connected to that staging company. By tomorrow morning, Mindy won't be able to touch a dime of that money she's been funneling away. You really think they'll move that fast? Honey, did you see their faces when those forged documents came out? They've probably got people working overtime right now. She took a sip of her own drink. Identity theft, fraud, unlicensed business operations. Dean didn't just step in it, he dove in headfirst. The steam from my tea carried memories of all those mornings I'd made him coffee, trusted him, believed in us. I pushed the cup aside. What about my job? The boss still thinks, that's our next move, Carmen nodded. I've got that timeline folder right here. We're going to draft the cleanest, clearest summary your boss has ever seen. Every transaction, every forged document, everything that proves you were the victim, not the perpetrator. I pulled out my laptop and we spent the next hour crafting the most important email of my career. No emotions, just facts, dates, dollar amounts, document numbers. The kind of precision that had always been my shield. Now the landlord, Carmen said when we finished. Same approach, short, professional, documented proof of the fraud and account freeze. No excuses, no drama. Just the truth this time, I said, because I'm done carrying Dean's lies. We sent both messages, and the waiting game began. My boss's response came first. 3 words that felt like pebbles dropping into a deep well. We'll review everything. The landlord's reply wasn't much better. We'll see. Carmen squeezed my shoulder. They're covering themselves, legally. Standard procedure. But you've given them what they need. A clear path to separate you from Dean's mess. I stared at my abandoned tea, now cold. I need something to move forward to, you know? I can't sit here waiting for everyone else to decide if I get to have a life again. Then let's not wait. Carmen pulled up a rental listing on her phone. Top floor apartment, morning sun, open tomorrow for viewings. 10 blocks from your office. I thought about my current place, how every corner now held an echo of Dean's betrayal. You really think I should? I think you need to show everyone, including yourself, that you're not stuck in this story. She tapped the listing. 9 a.m. showing. I'll drive. The next morning, standing in that sun-filled apartment, I felt something close to peace for the first time in days. The leasing agent walked me through each room, and I could see it. My books arranged just so, my little herb garden on the balcony, my life rebuilt without Dean's shadow. Then came the application process. The agent's smile flickered as she scrolled through her tablet. Ms. Callahan, I'm seeing a flag here about an IRS issue. Should we be concerned about that? My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice steady. Actually, I have documentation about that. It's part of an identity fraud case that's just been broken open. The state licensing board has all the evidence. You know what hurts most about betrayal? It's not the initial wound. It's how the poison spreads, making you explain yourself over and over to strangers who only see the flag, the warning, the doubt. Each explanation feels like you're the one who did something wrong, even when you're the one who was wronged. I pulled out my phone, ready to forward all those carefully. Gathered documents one more time, wondering if I'd ever stop having to prove my innocence. Looking back now, a month feels like both a heartbeat and a lifetime. You know what I mean? The kind of month where every day brings another small victory until suddenly you're standing in a different life altogether. I was unpacking boxes in my new top-floor apartment when Carmen called with the final report on Dean's spectacular downfall. The state licensing board hadn't just frozen his accounts. They'd frozen everything connected to that fake staging company. Turns out paper trails have a way of spreading like wildfire once someone lights the match. He's completely locked out, Carmen said, and I could hear her satisfied smile through the phone. Can't access a dime of the money he stole from you or scammed from others. His broker's license is suspended pending investigation. The morning sun spilled through my new windows, painting warm squares on the hardwood floors. I set down a box of kitchen supplies and walked over to feel the heat on my face. And Mindy? Even better. They traced her siphoning right through those company accounts. She's as broke as he is now, and they're both looking at fraud charges. I nodded, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeam. You ever notice how light looks different when you're finally free of shadows? What about the boss? Any more questions about my involvement? Not a peep since you handed over that timeline folder, though I heard through the grapevine that he's still fuming about Dean making the brokerage look bad. Carmen paused. How's the new place? I glanced around at the half-unpacked boxes, each one labeled in my careful handwriting. It's perfect. Higher rent, but worth every penny. The landlord even waived the credit check after I showed him the fraud documentation. And no more 7-day notices, Carmen added. No more notices, I agreed, running my hand along a pristine countertop. No more wondering if someone's draining the account while I sleep. I spent that afternoon unpacking slowly, deliberately. Each plate and glass I unwrapped felt like a small ceremony, proof that you can rebuild without compromising your dignity. Every folded shirt I hung in the closet was a quiet declaration. I survived without begging anyone to behave. Remember how I said order feels like safety? Well, watching my new space come together, item by item, felt like building armor. Not the heavy kind that weighs you down, but the kind that reminds you how strong you've become. The late afternoon light was turning golden when I reached the last box. Inside was Dean's forgotten coffee mug, the one he always left, unwashed in the sink, expecting me to handle it like everything else. I'd kept it for a reason that took me weeks to understand. See, some people would have smashed it, scattered the pieces like the promises he broke. Others might have donated it, trying to erase every trace of betrayal. But I had a different idea. I filled that mug with fresh potting soil and nestled in a delicate orchid, the kind that thrives on neglect but blooms spectacularly when treated right. Standing there in my new kitchen, watching the sunset paint the petals pink and orange, I finally said the words I'd been holding back. Trust is earned once. Betrayal lasts forever. It wasn't about bitterness. It was about remembering that even betrayal can be repurposed into growth. Every time I water that orchid now, I'm reminded that I didn't just survive. I rebuilt something better. The whole experience taught me something crucial about justice. Sometimes it arrives wearing a business suit instead of a cape, armed with documentation instead of superpowers. And sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't about causing pain. It's about standing in your own sunlight while karma does the heavy lifting. You know what the best part is? That golden afternoon light still fills my apartment every day around 4 o'clock, and every single time I think about how different it feels to watch the sunset when you're finally standing on higher ground.